Hey, welcome in, everybody. Let's jump into some analysis for whether or not the 911 is setting up for a specific exit. And there's some ways that you can potentially recapitalize that investment and start to move it maybe into some other things. And one could be another car. Of course, that's the route I'm probably going to take, or adding to the collection, because the idea also is to build assets that potentially could go up in value or at least lose the least amount of money in value. We'll talk about all that today. We'll also take a drive in the 911 endurance race to kind of talk through what are some options here, because you can also sell this and drop this right into some crypto investments. Of course, I would probably look at, either XRP, Ethereum, maybe Solana. All of those might be nearing the bottom. So if they are, is this the time to take liquid assets like a 911 or any supercar for that matter, or high performance rate, sports car, and possibly look at repositioning those assets? Now, some people would say, all right, well, you want to really consider the diversification, whether you are looking at crypto, mine, it's crypto, high performance automobiles, businesses. Those are the three cornerstones of really what this podcast and what this show kind of focuses in on. As you guys know, we run a huge crypto channel, Paul Barron Network, which is where I kind of talk about all things tech, crypto, regulatory, all that kind of stuff. So you guys can check it out over on YouTube or over on the podcast side of things. But I want to go over to a couple of things to kind of get into today's topic, and that is the 911 endurance race. Now, this is a very special car that I have, and there's obvious reasons. The endurance race comes from the era of the Le Mans Endurance Challenge. This, of course, I would say is one of the unknown signals that come out of Porsche every once in a while. And the interesting part is that with the endurance race, this car essentially has the heartbeat of a GT3 underneath it in terms of the steering, the suspension, and of course, the performance is set in a body of a 911S. So it's a very unusual vehicle, but of course, that unusual vehicle is what really put Porsche on the map when it came to the endurance race competition, which of course was a Le Mans component. And what really kind of set this particular car up for Porsche. And we continue to see a lot of Porsche's development, whether you look at the 911 series going into the 992, which is, of course, the current car being made. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, the last naturally aspirated V6 coming in the 991.2, which is the car we're going to go drive here in a minute, is the car to get. And it is one of the reasons that we are starting to see some movement in the market when you go in and look at the 911, the 991 911 Carrera S. Let me jump over to Bring a Trailer real quick. And if you guys, I'm sure most of you guys are watching our podcast know about Bring a Trailer. The nice thing about Bring a Trailer is it goes through the historical sales of that particular car. Now, granted, this is my car is the endurance race, but I want to show you something here that is very interesting. And it almost looks like a crypto chart here, guys. And that is this trend line that's happening that's slowly pecking up to where you start to see more and more cars in the higher ranges there. And I'll zoom in on this because this is something that I think you guys have to understand what this could potentially mean for an investment class vehicle. So you think about this because some of these go all the way back into, let's go and take a look at the years right there, 22. Those were kind of flat right here. And in fact, probably dipping down right here until 2024, late 24. And then right here, you see this grouping of a lot of 911 Carrera S's in the 991 .1 and 2 series, which again, naturally aspirated V6, have started to move. And when you look at just some of the vehicles that have been out there, you're already starting to see some pretty good performance of some of these cars, all the way back to 2013. You go into now the 2017. Then you cap on top of that this being an endurance race car that I have, it does change things up quite a bit in whether or not this is the time. And is this the time to swap it out for another supercar, keep it in the fleet, or the collection and possibly just add something to it. So we're going to be talking about that today on the drive. We'll go into that, dive into a couple of things that potentially could be on the hunt right there. And one of the things that I am considering is the Huracan. So I know everybody will say, oh, typical crypto bro, Lamborghini, of course, he's going to go Lamborghini. I don't know. I may surprise you, but looking at the Lamborghini, the one thing that I want to kind of focus in on, you'll notice right here, the same year model right there, a 2017 LP580 going for around 210. This was back in May over on Bring a Trailer. And then you can get to the LP640 right there. There was a 2018 went for 294. So you can kind of see the differences in the Lamborghini. Super Trofeo, man, that's crazy. That's not the car for me. I loved the Huracan Storado, which was kind of the off-road version of the fact that they did this was just crazy. And I love that about sometimes the Lamborghini. There's an Evo right there coming in at it's 2021, 3,700 miles. But it does bring up a constant concern of mine for Lamborghinis and supercars in general. I live in Miami area, and there's a lot of rentals. And the problem that you have with rentals in Miami is these cars, love it or hate it, they attract a certain kind of person. And unfortunately, the people who are true supercar owners, whether you're on Supercar Saturdays or Cars and Coffee, these people put money into these cars. They kind of support the market, the community, all that. That's the kind of, investor I am in these kind of cars. And one thing that's happening right now is the fact that we are seeing mileage blockers more and more. Now, what is a mileage blocker? Essentially, this is a little device that goes into a vehicle and it slows down the mileage rotation. And of course, you put in 10,000 miles, it looks like 2,000 miles. That's the problem that you have with a lot of these. The only way to really find it is go into the ECM and really do a diagnostics on what the car's true mileage is. And that's where I think we're seeing a lot of these. So if you are looking at going in and investing in something like that, whether it's Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, any of these cars that kind of flow in this, obviously we're not talking about the super cars out there. But these in the range of say 150 all the way up to say 500,000. Those are the kind of cars that right now make it into the rental fleets, and those are the ones that are getting the mileage blockers. So that's the concern I have, because I almost am trying to think, would I even buy a car from Miami? The problem is that ironically, when you go do Carfaxes on any of these cars that maybe are on Bring a Trailer or out there on, Cars and Bids, or, any of the places that potentially have a lot of these kind of cars, go look at the Carfax, because you'll see the owner list, and it is ironic how many of these cars go through Miami and then find their way somewhere else in the country. So Miami is the dead zone. If a car comes to Miami and it's in this supercar range, I'm at the point now I probably wouldn't buy it. Unless you're buying new, and if you're going to get a 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old supercar, you need to know who's behind it. You want all the service records you can get, because this is an investment for you guys. Most of you guys, this would be an investment, and you want it to hold that value. Some of these cars are going to be going up in value. When you look at just Lamborghini in general, you can kind of see right here. Let me show you the amount of movement that we've seen in the Lamborghini Huracan. This is the Huracan market right here. I'll kind of zoom out a little bit here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But you'll notice right here, this was dipping down back here, even though you did have some of the high ranges. But right now we're starting to see a little bit of movement up. However, what's happening right here is we're starting to see these mileage blocker cars get identified. And it's causing the market to maybe struggle a little bit, but it's causing some of the better other cars maybe to start to trend up. So you're seeing some grouping here, some grouping here. And that is something to keep an eye on. And, from a 911 to a Huracan, a McLaren, possibly go into the Ferrari range, the Corvette Z06, or even the ZR1, ZR1X, I think would be almost unattainable. It's one of those you just can't get to. But it kind of like the GT3 RS. I mean, there's certain Porsches you just can't get to unless you're on allocation, and then you've got to go buy 3 other, Taycans or something to to be able to get access to that car. That's not the kind of cars I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, guys, is going in between 100K and let's say 300K and being able to lock in the value of something or slightly appreciate. If you're looking at long-term hold on any of these kind of cars, these will be worth a lot. Like the 911, my 991.2, I think in 2 to 3 years, that car is going to increase anywhere between 20 and 40% based on what we're seeing right now, mainly because of the 992s, the new car that's out there with Porsche, continues to go up in price. And what happened this year was the 911 increased, I think it was 17% for the 2027 year model. That's the kind of craziness that's happening. And when you have that kind of lift in the retail for a new vehicle, it drives up and pulls up the rest of the market, especially when you have a naturally aspirated. So the question today is, do we sell into the rise of that market? It's kind of like buying Ethereum or XRP. Do you sell into the rise of the market or do you hold? The difference here is the volatility. Unless something is very unusual, and I would say none of that would ever be the case for Porsche, is unless there's some crazy volatility, like the mileage blocker situation that we're seeing in some of these supercars, that could be unexpected volatility if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time on the wrong car. But it's not like crypto where I could lose, like Bitcoin, where you might have been in at 125 and now Bitcoin's sitting at 65. Paul, that's a 50% drop. Exactly. That's my point. That's the volatility that you have. So if you're looking for sideline cash to hold, whether it's in stable coins, gold, any of the assets that you feel are much more liquid, or you just want to have fun, automotive is another sector, as well as businesses. Businesses are much more long-term. We'll talk about all that. But today we are going to take a drive in the 911 and try to figure out, is there maybe a car swap here? Is there a potential hold? And reposition that capital into crypto. Let's find out. That they made 78 of these for the United States, a little over 200 worldwide, and 2017 was the year. And of course, we'll flip over to sport mode here. Of course, the advantage on this car is the driving experience of a 991.2, which is the 2017 year model that goes up, I think, to 2019, is very connected to the road. You'll feel it. If you're driving this car, you're going to feel the steering and the significance of the acceleration. We'll get out and do a little bit of that. People doing some crazy stuff out in the neighborhood today. But one thing I think that you kind of have to consider is in a collectible car like this, it's rare that I will take it out for a drive. And the reason is that this one's setting at, what do we got, 22,000 miles on it, and this is a 2017. That's probably, for a collector, that's right on the cusp of too many miles. They like them under 20K, in some cases under 10. But the point is that I'm looking for a driver. Now, I could stay in the 911 realm, and that would be something that would be great. It's something that I think a lot of people would say, yeah, of course, 911, Porsche, there's no substitute. But I think a lot of people have to understand one thing. When you love cars, driving them is 90% of the fun. It's not the ownership. It's not even the, sitting there and looking at it. Looks like we got some cars being dropped off here. We have that a lot in our neighborhood too. Most of the time it's G-Wagons, Porsches. Nobody dropping a Cybertruck lately, that's for sure. Anyway, the point being is that you've got a limitation on what you can do in terms of driving the vehicle, and that is anytime you've got a collector or something like that. I am a driver, and of course drivers want to do that, and getting into a collectible, first of all, I think this is the one thing that I would recommend to anybody. If you like driving vehicles, don't buy one of 78. It's you feel terrible when you drive it, and that's not what this car is meant to feel like. It's meant to feel like it's was designed out of Germany, and that, of course, is a visceral experience. There's a electric Cayenne. That's terrible. But they're out there. You're going to notice a little bit of fun with this one. We'll get it up there on the outer straights and give it a little juice. But that's the beauty of the 911, is their performance on this car is unmatched. In terms of, now it's not the fastest off 0 to 60. You know, the Z06s are going to easily eat this thing for lunch. You're going to have a lot of Ferraris that come up and test you, the BMW M3s, even the M4s to a certain extent. They're going to test you, and it's a common thing that you're going to deal with in any of the Porsches, is you got constantly, somebody wants to race. Somebody wants to race all the time. You can hear that naturally aspirated 6 coming in hot, beautiful, and we'll drop it down into Sport Plus, and you'll notice there is an immediate flip on how this thing sounds. If you're using paddle shifters, which is really the way to go on a car like this, if you can get a manual in a 911, that is the ultimate, I think, the performance-wise. The grip on this car is, I would pretty much, when people explain it as driving on rails, the ability for this car to move inside and out is uncanny. And that's what makes the 911 so amazing for sports car owners. And I think a lot of people look at the 911, maybe not as a supercar, but definitely as a high-end sports car. I know a lot of people in the GT3 community would probably argue with me that the GT3 is a supercar, but I still would argue against that. I'm of the mindset that the Porsche 911, the basis of it, and a supercar is built on what is the base level of the vehicle. If it's a sports car, you know, if you take the C8 Corvette, that's a sports car. The Z06, the ZR1, those are all evolutions of the C8, much like the 911. Everything is an evolution of the Carrera, including the GT3, whether you want to agree with that or not. It is a real dilemma that I think Porsche owners have to deal with. It is not a supercar, it is a sports car. That's my thinking. Now, granted, it can compete with supercars if you get into a GT3. Or if you go into something like a Cayman, GT4, there's obviously there's vehicles that can kind of go in this. But the real question today, as you can see, this is almost a flawless vehicle inside. It's just, I keep this thing garage kept. It is a true garage queen, as you'll notice right there, the Carrera Endurance Race glistening in the carbon package that's inside this car. It's just a phenomenal vehicle, and of course its ability to accelerate is good. Would I put it on the level of a Z06 or an M4? No, I would not. You know, the M4 is quicker. The Z06 easily takes the Carrera 6 or Carrera S, and both on straight line. Now put this on a track, and the suspension, the grip, and the ability for this car to load balance is really where its special, talents are, over what you'll see in some of the, especially in the track cars on the Z06s. But in the M4s, maybe a little different with those. The M4s and the M3s do a pretty good job with it. So what would you compare if you were replacing a 911 and said, okay, I only want to have one extra car because I have a driver. Actually, I have two drivers that we drive constantly, all in the SUV family. And you go from a G-Wagon or a Rover, and then you have basically a sports car. So the sports car is what I'm looking at, trying to put into a new world. And really it's a question of what would that sports car be if you were replacing a 911. So the candidates for this on a 911 Carrera S, basically is what you have here is a Carrera S. Yeah, it's got the endurance race package, and there's a lot to it, support-wise, you know, and all of that. But it is what it is. You know, you're dealing with a collectible vehicle that is very, very lightly driven, if driven at all. And that's also a shame for a car like this to essentially sit in a garage, captivated, instead of being out on the open road and enjoying what it's really meant to do, and that is absolutely perform, without a doubt. So, considering the idea of a BMW, you could look at the M3. That's a four-door. I know that's probably saying, well, you know, if you're going to go a 2+2 route, go to the M4. The M4 resale value, there goes a nice little BMW there, X6. The M4 value, though, in terms of marketability, and that's the thing I think when you look at cars, these are not investments, even though some of these in this level of a car would be. But for the most part, let's let it air out a little bit. Beautiful sound. Let's go on up into the 4. I mean, you literally just don't. The gearbox on this thing is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. The PDK is an unmatched transmission. You know, I think the new transmission in the Z06, though, I've driven that, and it's pretty close. It's pretty close to what's happening in the Porsche. And I would say overall, it's unbelievable. Man, every time you drive this car, it just puts a smile on your face, and it's one of those that makes you think. Is it the way to go or not? And I think that's the point behind this. So let's get back to it. Let's conversate about the idea of what would be a replaceable vehicle on the Porsche 911S, because that's essentially what we'd be replacing, is a 911S. I'm going to look at a couple of cars here. You could dive into the Ferraris. You're going to spend about double what a 911 is going in at. You could go ahead and look at a Huracan, you know, sure, on the Lamborghini line. I'm just not that flashy. I would probably, if I was going to go flashy, the Z06 is probably as high as I would go. And the Corvette is one of those that is a love or hate community. The BMW, the M4, and the M3 community is absolutely passionate. And it's very similar to the Porsche community. The amount of passion in those owners is almost unmatched for what this car is really built for. Porsche community is very, very accepting as well. I will say that. The dealers are a little bit pompous, dealing with service and also dealing with just in general the kind of dealers that we have here in South Florida that are, and there's one, you know, I won't name names, but if you're a Porsche guy, you probably know them. If you're in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, you know what's up. But there's a handful of these Porsche dealers that are absolutely just a-holes. Some of them, okay. But if you're going in for service, and of course, the issue with service, just understand these cars require a tremendous amount of maintenance, as do all sports cars, especially high-end sports cars. This car, though, maintenance-wise, just put a brand new set of Michelin Pilot Sports on this one, so you're going to go through tires pretty easily, even if you're driving in a spirited way. But that is one of the things that I think, if any, I would probably miss from owning a 911 if I decided to sell this one, is the community. The community is absolutely unbelievable. They are probably one of the things that draws you to the Porsche brand. And it is definitely one of the things that I would say draws you into what's happening with the Porsche brand. Because right now, Porsche is going through some rough times. First of all, they're not making money as a company. They've been back and forth on the EV side. They've lost to the Macan, which I think was a terrible situation. You know, the last year of the Macan is now done. The EV is here, and they're going to supposedly come up with something in between, which, you know, is a great car if you were going to use it as a secondary SUV, whatever that car might be. I imagine it's going to be an SUV, but it could be a crossover of some sort. But the Macan has been a fantastic car, and I can't believe Porsche screwed that one up, but they did. And I think that is one of the challenges that you face in the Porsche brand, is they constantly are doing something to mess up the cars that are built this brand to what it is. And that is something that I think a lot of people miss. And that is, it's like when the 911s, when they even threatened that the 911 might be a hybrid or an electric 911, the pushback on the community was out of control. And I think that is what got Porsche's attention. But by then, they had spent so much money on engineering and trying to put together an electrification strategy that they have lost the plot. And many owners, you might say, well, it's not the Porsche plot, it's the cars that have been built before. And I would agree, if you own a naturally aspirated V6 Porsche Li6, yeah, I would say if you own a naturally aspirated 6 in a 991.2 or 991.1, or even if you go into the 997s, you're setting on a gold mine over time. But it's a 10-year hold. This is a car as a 10-year hold. Do I want to put money in this asset to hold like I would in crypto? You know, as you guys know, I'm a big crypto guy. And sometimes I would say yes, because some crypto products, even if you look at Bitcoin and you look at Ethereum where it is right now, I mean, essentially, I'm down more on Bitcoin and Ethereum than I would be on putting 120 grand inside of a Porsche 911 or 150 or up to 200 if you go into a used GT3. That is, you know, that's something, and it's a bank, essentially. These cars don't depreciate much, if at all. They will if you put miles on them, but that is the thing that you have to make a decision on. If you want to drive the car or simply go and hold the car for collectability purposes or flipping purposes and use it as an investment class. I'm more on the sense of having fun with these vehicles and losing the least amount of money, because the enjoyment of a Porsche 911, a BMW M3 or M4, a Ferrari if you're going into the Ferrari class, or even to a certain extent the Lamborghinis, the enjoyment of these cars is just unbelievable. And if you jump up in the Corvettes into the Z06, then you know what's up. You understand the fun that is behind this. And I think that is part of the idea of putting money in cars like this, is that you want to lose the least amount of money and still be able to maintain those. So that's what you want to be able to do, guys. It's the only way to do it. So with that in mind, and I don't know if I've talked myself into moving out of the Porsche or just going into a 911 GTS, a 911 Targa, or another Carrera S is the real question. That is the question mark. And I think the top candidates right now are probably going to end up being the Z06s, possibly the M3 or M4, and beyond that, maybe the Lamborghini Huracan. The Gallardo is a possibility, I guess, in a way. But the key here is how much money do you want to put in and drop into these cars. let's talk Z06. Let's put that at the top of our list. Z06, if you want to take a little bit off the top side and go off of the edge of depreciation, because you're going to buy a 1, 2, or 3-year-old Z06, you're going to be able to experience the market floor, meaning the car is going to be very close to what it's probably going to hold over years, and you're going to lose the least amount of money. And anything less than 20% on a 1 to 3-year hold is fantastic on a sports car that you're enjoying versus what you see in regular automobiles. There goes a nice 911 Carrera right there, beautiful. That's the key, is 20%. That's the target zone. The amount of camaraderie that you have in these communities is unbelievable too. All right, so back to the point of the Z06 and the Corvette community, because I think that's something you have to kind of consider in your decision-making processes of putting money in an automobile that is going to be a sports car for fun, and not losing a lot of money so that you can retain that asset, put that money back to work, maybe when a market is recorrecting. Like if you look at Bitcoin right now, you could take your wins out of Bitcoin, put it in an asset that's not going to lose money. Yes, you can put it in stable coins and you can put it in other assets out there, even though I would say real estate has been one of the things that's the least favorite of mine right now. But yeah, and you put it in an asset like automobiles. I would go with something that is a sports enthusiast, has a massive community behind it, because it's going to give you the largest pool of buyers. Just like a meme coin, just like a crypto, a blue chip, a stock, doesn't matter. You could take it and put it into some AI stocks right now. You could drop this into a variety of the subset of what's happening in the AI community, which is the semiconductor market, absolutely on fire. If you were in Micron, basically I'm exiting Micron and I'm exiting Jupiter right now from major investments. Jupiter, if you guys know Jupe token, that is part of the Solana ecosystem. Exiting out of that after making a ridiculous amount, the opportunity now, and then retaking that, putting it into maybe an auto asset, some of those wins, and or dropping it into another business that I'm looking at dropping money into, which is another major area that I talk about a lot on this channel, and that is business acquisition and also private equity, meaning you become the angel investor for these business and founders, and I'm in several right now. We'll talk about them on the channel because there's some that are absolutely doing phenomenal. But that is one of the biggest areas of where you can, those are very long-term holds though. That's a very long-term hold. You don't have the ability to liquidate the asset or you get your position out of it in many cases unless they're doing a cap table adjustment and they're willing to buy back your shares. But for the most part, businesses are going to be anywhere between 5 to 10 years of investment, but the returns on these could be 10x, 50x, 100x. I've got one business right now that is literally setting on about a 30x in terms of an investment, but I'm in this one now almost 6 years. The likelihood of that one exiting is probably going to be somewhere around 9 to 10, so it's still another 3 to 4 years out. But back to the Z06, that is probably the car that might be a replacement for it. In terms of the visceral feeling that you have in driving the Porsche 911S versus a Corvette Stingray or a Corvette Z06. The Z06, hands down, is the better car. Now, there's a lot of people talking about this new Grand Sport that is coming out, and that, of course, is the 2027 Grand Sport, which is an interesting proposition, but it is it's a meme coin of cars right now because it is a car that has the Z06 body, but not the Z06 engine. It doesn't have the handling, the braking of the Z06, but it has the body. And the sound is unbelievable with this new engine that Corvette and Chevrolet have mastered. This will be the next one coming out. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here. We'll get into that today. But I wanted to go out for a drive because This is a car that I am considering transitioning out of and into something that will be much more of a, not a driver, it's definitely not a daily, but it's a driver in the sense that you can take this, I can take it over to the studio a couple times a week. I can go out on a variety of trips. I can go out and of course road trip this car, and that I cannot do in this 911. It just absolutely has to be limited because the mileage has too much of a hit on a collectible 1 of 78 911 endurance race.